Everybody for the Smart Justice Town Hall. I am just going to pause for just one moment for people to log in and for people to share our Facebook Live and invite some people that you feel need to be included or part of this conversation. So we'll just wait a brief moment. To share our Facebook Live and invite some people that you feel need to. If it's there. All right, just about 10 more seconds. We're going to go ahead and start. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for everyone who is tuning in. Again, this is our weekly town hall with Smart Justice. We originally had this town hall scheduled for last week, Wednesday, but given the circumstances that have been going on and what transpired in our state with Jacob Blake, we decided to postpone this conversation. And so we are having it now. And for those just tuning in, this is a conversation that we had with our Smart Justice Campaign Manager, Sean Wilson, and Ali Frankel from Human Rights Watch. The Human Rights Watch, along with the ACLU of Wisconsin, did a report of recent data regarding probation and revocation. And I'm going to go ahead and highlight some key points in that through this conversation, as well as we have some fantastic panelists joining us today. And thank you again for being able to cancel from last week and be present with us. But first, before I want to get started, I want to take a moment of silence to acknowledge Jacob Blake and his family, as well as the following protests, two of them who were murdered and the other one who was wounded, and to Joseph Rosenbaum and Anthony Huessner, who were killed, and then Gage Grosquetz, if I'm saying that correct, was wounded. I just want to take a moment of silence for them and their family for just about 30 seconds, and then we will continue. All right, thank you for that. As we know, I had a heavy week last week, and I understand and know that a lot of people, it's a very heavy time. And so I certainly want to acknowledge that and have space for that. However, we felt like it was important to bring this conversation back up because this is one of many systems that is an issue in our state. It's a very oppressive one. And it's also racially biased when we talk about who is on probation and who is getting revocated in our state. I want to go ahead and quick highlight some key points from the report that Sean and Ali Frankel had shared several weeks ago, in that in Wisconsin from 2017 until 2019, drug use was by far the most common violation, leading to sanctions and up to and including incarceration, accounting for 1 of every 5 violations during that period, or 27,000 violations during that period for this. The most common rule violations that led to incarceration were drug use. And we also call that what we call a technical rule violation of probation. One of the many rules that many people have on supervision is you cannot enter a bar. You cannot use any type of drugs or alcohol. And for those people who do struggle with drug and alcohol addictions, being incarcerated for relapse, as we can see, is an issue. And I also want to highlight in that 1 in every Black man is on supervision in the state of Wisconsin, which is more than 5 times the rate for a white man. 89 rates are also high for Native American men, and one out of every 11 of whom were on supervision, a rate 4 times higher that of white men. So again, in the state of Wisconsin, very high for the rates of that. One thing that I do want to point out is that when we talk about the incarceration of women, and we have about 1,400 women incarcerated in the 3 prison systems in the state of Wisconsin. Looking into last year in 2019, more than half of those women are in our prison system for a technical rule violation. And I also highlight this because we have a narrative in our state that people in our prison systems are there for committing violent acts of crime, and that is false. We have people that are funneling in and out of our prison system for a rule of probation, like the ones I gave to you, and that's costing us as taxpayers more than $39,000 a year for these people to get revocated for someone who relapsed, and that person may only be going back to prison or jail for a year or less, and the needs of that person, unfortunately, are not met. And when we talk about the issues of, probation, it's an oppressive system, and we're going to have 3 panelists talk about their experience of this system. But what I want you to know out of this is, for people on supervision, this is, for at least in our state, the returning system, because we have so many people who might be serving 10 or more years on supervision. And before I go ahead and let me just move this over, I want to go ahead. We have some fantastic panelists, Leah, Niki, and Philip. I'm going to start with Leah. They're going to go ahead and give you an introduction of who they are. Go ahead, Leah.
My name is Leah Huessner. I am a formerly incarcerated woman. I am the Fox Valley Regional Organizer for the ACLU's Right for All campaign. Done work in the past with Expo, some other great groups, and we're all working together trying to stop crime revocation.
I'm Niki Wilichowski. I was recently released in December of 2019 after 7 years for a drug conviction. And I was also hired on recently as a regional organizer for the ACLU Racine. And I am currently a student. This is my 2nd time going to college, and I'll touch later what happened with my first trip to college and how that ended.
Thank you, Niki. Philip?
Hi, I'm Philip Bennett, formerly incarcerated. I've been out for about 10 years. I'm a local business owner in Appleton, Wisconsin, and I work with Melissa for ACLU. Just trying to help formerly incarcerated people get jobs, gain housing.
Thank you all for that. And again, thank you for being with us today. So as we get started, and again, for people watching, if you have any questions, feel free, if you're on Facebook Live, to go ahead and ask questions either in the chat, or if you're also watching through Zoom, feel free to go ahead and ask questions. We'll get to those towards the end, about 7:10 or so. To get us started, I'm going to go ahead and start out with Leah. Leah, can you share with us what your experience has been like being on supervision and how that has affected your family, primarily your daughter?
It's extremely hard because it restricts a lot of everything you could do. But it also, you're always looking behind your shoulders, wondering if somebody's going to call and put an allegation against you, which will then get you put on hold, possibly revoked. Depends on your agent, really. Your whole family ends up getting put on probation, pretty much. Because if you're living with them, they have to follow your rules as well. I couldn't go on field trips with my daughter. I can't vote to put more money into this her school district. When my revocation happened, I had been on probation for 9 years with no holds, no violations, no nothing. She was not expecting me to be pulled away from her in an instant. And then it causes so many more issues. Your parent's not just gone, but she ended up has severe anxiety, body dysmorphia. There was some issues with self-harm. I mean, it really affects people. And I don't think they understand that they're not just punishing the person for making a rule violation, but they are putting lasting effects on these children. And if we have that many people in our prisons right now on crimeless revocations, how many of them have kids? And how many of those kids don't have somebody to go and talk to? You know, we were lucky somebody noticed at the school and said something. But how many people aren't noticing? How many, somebody might just be thinking that the kid's acting out and a problem, and then they want to kick that kid out of school when all that kid's trying to do is get that anger and frustration and hurt out because, one or both parents are gone. My daughter did experience that with her father as well. He went away on a crimeless revocation too. So this has affected her in a lot of ways.
And just to recap, I know what you said. I've had the privilege of working with Leah now for almost, I think it's been 2 years. And I remember when you shared with me that you just like you did now, you had 10. And it was on that last year when you were almost free, being switched over to a new probation officer, that an allegation came onto you. And then all that time that you did is not counted for.
Yeah. And I had a withheld sentence. So none of that time counted. And I had to go back in front of my original judge to be resentenced again. So then I got another 5 years of probation and another 18 months of incarceration. So, I've already been on probation for 13 years and I have another 3 years to go. 16 years total of probation. And for what? I haven't committed crimes. I'm not out doing crazy things. I'm behaving. I'm just raising my daughter. That's all I'm trying to do. When I got out in 2009, I went and got, several college degrees, bought my own house as a single mother, was just doing everything that I thought I should do. But sometimes it just doesn't matter. They don't care how good you're doing. They will take any little thing and use it against you.
Thanks for sharing that, Leah. And for those tuning in, there is no due process for people when it comes to rules of probation, which means that in the state of Wisconsin, a person can be revocated for hearsay and an allegation. And we have in our state over 66,000 people that are on some form of supervision. And many of them live in fear of if somebody did call or say something that's not true, because we've seen this happen many times, depending upon the relationship with the agent and so forth. So many different things play a part in it, as well as racial bias. I want to turn it over to Niki. Niki, I know in talking with you, and I've had the pleasure of certainly getting to know you these last few months, that with you being a student, what was your experience like being on supervision and somebody as a student, and how that affected your family?
It's so stressful when you're trying to live right, do the things you need to do, and just having that hanging over your head that at any time a person that doesn't like you could call your probation officer and make up some nonsense and you could go to jail. And for me, starting school now, that we don't think sometimes how things like that can actually be traumatic, because a lot of my old anxiety, I didn't even realize that I still had it. It was just laying dormant there. And when I registered for school, it was kind of, it woke up again. And that's when I realized that back in 2011-ish, 2012, I was registered at Globe University. I was living in Wausau at the time. And I was in school for business administration, and there was a girl that didn't like me. And we had been friends at one point in time, and the friendship just ended. And she actually, something so petty, she thought that her boyfriend liked me, and she would call my probation officer all the time and say that I was doing things, and I would get locked up pending investigation, because they have a certain amount of time, like I think it's 21 days or something, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that they can hold you before they do anything, and you're just sitting there. It's dead time, 21 days, while they investigate whatever it is, whatever allegation has been brought against you. So even if you were cleared, and I was cleared multiple times, I was cleared, that's still 21 days or 13 days or however, that you're missing schoolwork, that you're missing work, that your family doesn't know what's going on with you. I don't have kids, but I ended up falling so far behind in my schoolwork, and you're already struggling. And I actually ended up relapsing because of the stress and because of feeling like you're inadequate and you're failure. And then you kind of just like, at some point I gave up. And I think it was like the third or fourth time that it had happened. Finally, my probation agent told her, like, you know, if you call one more time, you're going to have to come down, you're going to have to write a formal statement. And if it's not substantiated, then you're going to go to jail. But to me, it was like, why did it take 3 times of me getting locked up, me already falling behind in schoolwork, me ending up to decide that I can't do this, for that to happen? Why was that? And that's something that now that I'm in school again, even though I'm living right, I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to, I found that an incident had happened, and it kind of awoken that in me again. And I realized that some of these things that we don't necessarily think, they have residual, long-lasting effects on a person's psyche. Like, I still, even though I am living right, this irrational fear that a person could at any point in time decide that they don't like you for whatever reason, just call your PO. And if they don't know you, if your probation officer only has like a 10-15 minute interaction with you and they really don't know you or anything about your character, you have no defense. You literally have no defense.
Thank you for sharing that, Nikki. You know, all too often we hear about that level of fear, and we know that many people who are on some form of supervision or probation in our state, you know, live with that constant fear, or they live with a very small circle of people just to be able to get through. And, you know, in addition to this, for those who are tuning in who may not know, there's 18 standard rules to supervision, and we have many people who may have much more than that, up to 30, if not more. And when we talk about somebody getting released from prison, many people unfortunately get released to homelessness because there is not the space in communities for people to return home, and we often don't have welcoming communities. At the same time, when your rules are designed to almost oppress you and not build you up, we're talking about not able to obtain credit and build credit. We all know that a credit profile and your credit is significantly important, even to rent an apartment. If we have people who are homeless and are not able to give an address, or if they had to go stay somewhere and they thought they had some place to live, we shouldn't be locking somebody up because they couldn't report an address in time. For somebody who is not able to get to an appointment, there's many barriers in getting to an appointment when we talk about transportation. Single mothers who may be home and don't have anywhere for their children to go, but they have to go to the office. Also, there is severe anxiety, PTSD, that comes from having to go to the office because it's a feeling of somehow somebody's going to say I did something wrong. And that comes from the presence of the probation office. What I can say before I go ahead and turn this over to Philip is that since COVID-19 happened, we did have a significant release of individuals from county jails throughout the state of Wisconsin. I want to say around 1,400 for misdemeanor violations that were released. So we can see this is ending this process. We can see this happening. Whom we're talking about yet are people that are still locked up in our prisons right now, facing COVID. And we have many of our institutions now have a significant amount of numbers that are increasing. And so going back to, you know, oppressive things, the one thing that probation and parole started to do is they do video calls now, which has taken away anybody having to report into the office. They've had significant, I I want to say that majority of the people they were able to tune in with, but what they also noticed in that is that sense of anxiety is gone. The barriers of transportation are gone. Needing childcare is gone. So if we as a community can come together and work with each other, we in our state should not be sending people back to prison for these. Again, that's $39,000 each person of our money when we have 22,000 people, I think, incarcerated. And with 66,000 people that are on some form of supervision in our state, 41% of those people are on a low level status, which means they only check in every 3 months. It's not necessary. To Philip, I want to ask, as Philip being a business owner and the owner of a great restaurant in our community, Cozzy Corner, what has your experience been like hiring someone that's on supervision? We often hear that some owners of businesses may be hesitant, even though they don't want to discriminate, but what has that been like for you?
Well, it's funny you say that because I had a situation today where one of my employees called me crying because her PO was going to lock her up for allegations. So I told her, I'd go there with her. So this morning this afternoon, I went with her down to the police station, and they ended up locking her up just off allegations. So they walked her over to the county jail. Then when she got there, she called me and was like, which didn't. So they charged her with burglary, disorderly conduct, and a domestic. So she was supposed to work at 2 o'clock. So it just affects me as an employer because now I gotta go find somebody to take over a shift. We actually let her bring her kids, to the restaurant because she can't find a babysitter. So now I gotta take her kid home with me and hope that she get out tomorrow. So it just messes everything up. Cause as you can see, I'm on the road right now. I'm going to Racine. So Heidi had to keep her kid. It just messes everything up. Because if she don't get out tomorrow, which she probably won't, now I gotta look for somebody to replace her on the fly. She's lucky to have a boss like me that understands, because if she worked anywhere else, her kid would be in, wherever they take kids when the parents get locked up. So she have a whole nother issue to deal with, outside of when she got out. But it affects a lot of stuff. Like I said, now I gotta find somebody to replace her, which I don't have because we're short-staffed already due to COVID. So it just messes a lot of stuff up. And the POs don't try to hear nothing. The PO wasn't really trying to hear nothing I was talking about. So it kind of messed everything up.
Thanks for sharing that, Philip. And I hear you when you say that not many employers would be patient for something like this, right? Because there is a sense of liability, whether or not they might want to say it, but there is that liability. If somebody is running production or things have to get accomplished and done, that falls on many shoulders. And we sometimes know that for a rule violation, agents or police may show up at the person's job. And so, all of these things, it kind of comes back to what you're saying, unless it's absolutely necessary, that this doesn't need to happen. And I think when we talk about these barriers, for one, it's almost legal in our state. If you have a felony, nobody has to rent to you. And we know that that's a significant barrier. And so when somebody finally obtains housing and then they're finally able to get a job, because Wisconsin does have the Fair Employability Act, if they're locked up under investigation for hearsay of something, I mean, and dependent upon how long they're gone, I mean, they lose these things that they built up. And I think, you know, we all want to be able to see people in our community thrive. And so if we aren't really setting them up to be successful and be supportive and be members in our community, what are we doing? And so again, this just describes a system that is just constantly oppressive, and we need to stop that. And that brings me back, Philip, that time you told me that this also happened to you with somebody you hired working as a dishwasher. So I thank you for bringing that up. But, you know, if anybody who is watching or tuning in, if you're a business owner and this happened to you, we certainly want to hear from you, but we also want you to know we need you to be aware of these things, because we want you to hire these people, because a lot of these people coming home want to work. They're some of the best workers. They're very reliable in many situations. It's just, they can't control the fact that they're under a system. And unfortunately, that goes back to, again, Wisconsin is one of the few states, because I believe that 62% of states cap supervision at 5 years. And so if we as a state look at, you know, with truth in sentencing and those things, you know, we have people that are serving 10 plus, and if something happens, none of that time is accounted for. You're kept in a cycle. Leah, and before I see if there's any questions here, with you being on supervision for those 10 years, can you tell us how much did you pay a month for supervision fees?
It changed as I, you know, started moving up in my career and stuff. So I honestly, I mean, I think it was like 80 a month, at like my best salary was about 80 a month. So you times that, you know, I mean, I graduated college in 2011, so that's a good 6 years of that. So that's.
I like to, I want to highlight, because in the state of Wisconsin, people are either going to pay $20 a month, $40 a month, or $60 a month. And for some of those who want to look at those numbers, if you have somebody that's on supervision, you know, for 10 years,
It was $6,000 just in those 6 to 7 years.
$40 a month, the average, that's a lot of money. If you take $40,000 a month and times that by 66,000 people, how much money is that? And so again, and we're dealing with people who, you know, being Black or brown or, you know, in poverty, but, you know, we see so many of these people, first of all, that are on supervision that have unmet health needs. That's significant. You know, people walking out of these institutions are not necessarily treated with the right health care, and may walk out with severe health conditions. We also know that not everybody gets the right treatment service based on what their needs are. And so I strongly emphasize, you know, this is a community issue, and it's a community, it takes a community to say, we want to take control of what's happening, and we want to take care of these people in our community, and getting those services and creating those certain resources to get these people home to be functioning. Because again, like, these people are going to be our neighbors. And if they're set up to fail and not have support when they come home, I mean, if they walk out that door with not a strong support system and they have to go live in a shelter, tell me how that they're gonna struggle to thrive. And we're making money off of that in this state. I know Molly had said, again, if anybody has any questions or any questions they want to ask these panelists, feel free to ask questions. But like I said, one of the main things that stood out to me in this report, and Molly will go ahead and, if she hasn't already, pin the report in our Zoom and in Facebook, because I really want you to take a look at this report. It's about, I think it's 214 pages. And it compares Pennsylvania, Georgia, if I'm not mistaken, in the state of Wisconsin. And there's a page on here that shows how many people in our state are getting revocated. I mean, for what? And so if not revocated, a sanction, and a sanction is really an alternative to revocation, meaning that somebody might have to serve a weekend in jail for violating a rule, or they might have to spend a week. I've seen some agents be really flexible in this and give sanctions for somebody to turn themselves in on a Friday night and get out Sunday night, just so that they could maintain their job and keep what they have. And that's another thing that we mentioned is there's alternatives to sending somebody away for a rule violation, but we know that not every region and not every agent operates in the same way. And this is why, again, we're having this conversation because, you know, these are people. If we look back to the 50s and 60s, you know, probation was really an alternative. You know, more than half, I think, of people who were being sentenced were put on probation. And then, you know, through the 80s, this really became in addition, you know, to a prison sentence. And in some cases, you know, 20 years ago, you know, agents necessarily weren't there to be supportive or to help you find resources and do those things. Many of them were trained to know or think that you're always going to do something wrong, okay? And if we have that mentality, and I see Niki, and I'll let you speak on this, and having that mentality, okay, that tends to be a mentality of some correctional officers, I don't want to say all, is that they're trained to think, they're trained to just define that you're always going to do something wrong. And if we have people that walk out that door that have that same mentality, this is not being supportive and helping these people, and we're profiting off of them. Niki, you had something to say?
So when you go to jail, they do offer some programs, and in therapy and things, they talk to you a lot about cognitive behavioral therapy and the importance of your thoughts, and as you think, so you are, and they try to get you to kind of change your way of thinking. So when it comes to things like that, when I was first put on probation, and I was 19 at the time, I walked into my probation officer's office, and the first thing he said to me is, "What is your DOC number?" And I had no idea. And I had taken a 10-year probation without sentence. I had no idea what that meant even, okay? And I ended up doing 4 years, 7 months, reporting every Tuesday to my PO before I got in trouble. And I had got 1 ATR, and then I got revoked. And side note, things in the county that I was in at the time, in Marathon County, women were not readily offered ATRs like men were. Men would get multiple ATRs, and women would get like one, and then they're off. So he asked me, "What's your DOC number?" And I didn't know. And he's like, "Well, you need to memorize that because you have 10 years on probation and you're going to go to prison." And that is how I started off my whole thing with probation and parole. Out the gate, right away, you're going to go to prison. They already know that if I'm reporting every Tuesday for 4 years and 7 months, every single Tuesday. How many people have that kind of accountability over their head? And if they're constantly looking for something, they're going to find it. It's like common sense. If you look for something, you'll find it sooner or later. And then you feel that mentality. You feel the mentality that I can't be successful. I can't do this. I am a failure. And those negative thoughts, they become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then you go to prison and they tell you, "Oh, well, you need to change your thinking. You need to change your thoughts, cognitive thinking," right? But they're the ones that planted those seeds. So the irony of it is just absolutely striking once you've lived it. And I don't think a lot of people realize that this is not only are you fighting the battle with your own issues, because most people that were doing drugs and committing crimes, there's a reason these things were happening. They're fighting their own trauma and they're not receiving correct treatment for that. You're fighting those issues, but then you're also fighting the negativity that you get from probation and parole and people that aren't willing to give you chances, that aren't willing to take risks on you, and it compounds it. It definitely compounds it, and that contributes to the recidivism rate.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Niki. I appreciate that. And you know, you speak so much truth into that. Is, you know, we have many people that come out and they're looking for somebody to have value or finding worth, and a lot of people are trying to rebuild who they are and their identity. And I want to add, you know, not all probation agents operate like that. I think we know that there's some good ones out there like correctional staff, but there are a few that it's just, you know, I'm here, and you know, if you do something wrong, you're gone, and that can be more damaging, especially if you're a parent and you have kids, and the long-term effects that it has on these children, especially if none of these people are committing a new crime. Leah or Philip, do you have anything to add to what Niki shared as well?
I feel like it's really important for people to really understand that people are not getting programming, they're not getting help, they're not getting rehab. You know, people are like, "Oh, they're going to go to prison and get the help that they need." That does not happen. The majority of people do not see any programming, especially depending on how much time they have. You can't even get decent healthcare in there. You know, everyone says, oh, you get the better healthcare than we do. No, we don't. People really need to look into what their tax dollars are being spent on, because all that money to house one person there for a year, and then the conditions that we live in and not being able to get that treatment that these people need, you know, it makes you wonder, where's the money really going? Why are people not actually being rehabilitated? Why are there not enough programming or programs out there for everybody? It's a good point. You know, she's right. People just don't get it unless they've been involved in this system. Unfortunately, they have no idea what it's really like.
Thanks for sharing that, Leah. Philip, did you have something to add?
Oh,
No? Okay. Again, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or post on our Facebook page. I know here is one, and this is a fantastic question, and I know Leah and Niki are going to have something to say with this one. So I'll open this up to whoever wants to take it first. We are in an election year. What will you ask the folks who are running for re-election to do to address these problems?
I mean, we need the ability for probation and parole to even conduct crimeless revocations. That needs to be stopped. That needs to be ended. Crimeless revocation needs to end now. We also need to take some of that power away from the probation and parole, I think, or change it around. I know if you're doing good, a probation officer can't let you off at your halfway mark anymore. You would have to petition the judge. I feel like we should give that back to the probation officer. That was always something that people looked forward to, like, oh, if I do really good and I do half my time, I can get off of probation early. But they took that away. I feel also, you know, there has to be a cap on the amount of probation people can get. That has to be changed as well. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things that we could ask, you know, for these people to, you know, write into legislation and get changed. And that's what we do on a regular basis, but it's getting to that point.
I think it's huge too for the community to kind of rally behind this and actually make the phone calls. And in the next couple weeks, we're going to be educating people on voting, and we're going to be providing links and information as to how they can figure out who their elected officials are. And at this point, we need constituents. We need the people that their taxes are paying for these things that aren't being handled right. We need them to make phone calls. We need them to send emails. We need them to voice that they are concerned about this, because, and I have been, and many people have been involved, and I guess I'll talk about this a little bit towards the end with Unlock the Vote, and we have been trying to mobilize people that have been incarcerated that are experiencing this, but it would be so helpful for people that have family members that have been incarcerated, or people that have a significant other that has been incarcerated or is going through these things, to actually reach out, to take that step to reach out, because that's what they're for. Politicians are there to serve you. That is their purpose. And we need to reach out to them and express to them what our desires is. And at the end of the day, if enough people call and enough people email and enough people say, hey, what's going on with your probation and parole system? Hey, why is the recidivism rate as high as it is? Hey, what is the purpose? And ask these questions. They have to respond. And they're quicker to respond, I think, to people that haven't necessarily been incarcerated. And they want your vote. At the end of the day, they want your vote. And everybody says that my vote doesn't count. Well, at the end of the day, they want your vote. They need your vote. So you have that power to impact them, to influence them, but not enough people actually take this step. And we will be providing you with the information of where you can go to figure out, you type in your address, figure out who your rep is, and you call them and you bring these things to them and you write down their answers, and then you reach out to one of us and we move forward. It's a team effort. It really does take a village.
Thank you both for sharing that. Philip, do you have anything to add? Okay. And just to go back and highlight to what they're saying is, and I just want to leave you again with this number, okay? Between 2017 and 2019, 23,327 violations were for drug use in our state. And if that number doesn't say something to you, we as a community need to be looking at what we can do as a community to keep these people here with their families and addressing what it is that they need in our own community. And just to kind of add in some of this and just to speak on this, certainly asking our legislators to end crimeless revocation. As my colleague Sean Wilson says, I mean, this is the lowest hanging fruit. And by ending this, we'll keep people, you know, within their communities, but we don't need to be paying for these people to be cycling in when that money can get reinvested into public education, for example, into more programming and addressing these needs. And some of the key recommendations I'm going to highlight even from this report alone came in from divesting from probation and parole and incarceration, and let's invest in access to jobs, as well as encouraging employers to want to be able to hire more of these people outside of having maybe a bias because of liability. Housing we know is crucial, education, and voluntary community-based substance use disorder and mental health services. And again, I'll speak to my community, Fox Cities. We really need, and just all in general, we really need our substance abuse and mental health communities to work together, because as we know, from a recovery is a lifetime, and we know that not every recovery method works for each person, and that has to be tailored to each individual. Of course, reducing the use of supervision sentences, and instead impose true alternatives and make that be equal for everybody. And like Leah had described, let's get back to capping supervision. Statistics show that if somebody has been out for 3 years, the likelihood of them ever committing a crime or doing anything is very significantly low. So we should be having people serving 10, 20 years on supervision in our state. I think, as we know alone, just having a felony conviction by itself is a lifetime of a consequence. Let me see if there's any other questions here real quick. I know we're getting to be about 7:20. Do either of you see any questions in the chat? I think that might be the only one. Do any of you have anything else that you want to add to this conversation at all? Philip?
Well, I just saw that somebody's comments about the mental health issue. Okay. And you're very correct, because people with mental health issues are not getting the correct medication and treatment in prison. And then they are released with 2 weeks worth of medication. Whether they're homeless or not, they just let them out on the streets. So there's already a hard time to get an appointment with any type of psychiatrist right now. I think it took me 9 months to see somebody for my anxiety disorder. 9 months. And I have to see him over a video because he's not even in our state. So how is someone who is possibly unmedicated, homeless, just trying to survive, supposed to figure out how to get health insurance, find a psychiatrist, get an appointment, get on their meds? How is somebody supposed to stay on their medication on a regular basis if they don't even have a home to live in? All of these things come together with that mental health issue, and we need more dual diagnosis treatments in prison. I mean, there's so much that goes with it, and I agree. We need way more mental health treatment than we do prison stays.
Thank you for that. Niki or Philip, do you have anything to add to that one? You know, even speaking in our community, Philip, how do you feel when we look at mental health and substance use programming in Appleton?
I can hear you. What did you say?
What do you think? I mean, what would your response be to that question, specifically even to our area in Appleton?
I really don't know, because I'm not, I never did drugs, right. Or I haven't been a part of, the AODA stuff. But I guess my thing would be, I was talking to Karen Nelson, and for me, it's just more action. I just feel like if people really wanted to change stuff, we do stuff. Like how you got Racine, when you go to their workforce development, they got programs, that you could either get your CDLs, become a welder or something like that. I think they should do those same kind of programs here for people who, get out of prison. That way they'll have something to go to when you're teaching them trade, instead of just letting them get out and they have nothing to go to, nothing you know, nothing to do, nothing to like build. If they're getting those trades already in prison, let them be able to come out and really exercise what they learned in the inside instead of not giving them a chance to do anything because they're felons or because of whatever their criminal history is. You know, I think that's something, you know, that will really work in Appleton if they did the same thing like we seen them do. Give those guys an opportunity, no matter if you're a felon or not.
Right. Thanks for sharing that. And, you know, too, there's something to be said, like, you know, some people might not be as resilient as somebody else, but that doesn't mean that, you know, that person just might need an extra hand and to help. But like Philip is saying, I think as we see it, when you take, first of all, addressing why somebody went to prison, and I do want to emphasize, though, we have a lot of people incarcerated who took a plea bargain in cases who really might be innocent. And we see oftentimes people, you know, are told if they take their case to court, they may get a lot more time. And we see people who just take these because of that. And so in knowing just in general how this system is, not necessarily addressing why you go there and being restorative and then coming from a place of healing, you know, communities really need to step up and take that and take care of their own. You know, it's a village, as we call our children. You know, it takes a village to raise kids. If there's no more questions, I know we're about 7:24. I want to give about a minute because we're getting down to our call of action. And again, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming on and sharing these pieces because these are not easy conversations to have, especially in this type of a platform. So I really commend all of you for your courage and for how all of you have really overcame and what you're building because all of it is amazing. So I'll hand it off to Leah. I'm just going to give you about a minute. Please give a call to action to our people watching and what is something that you would like them to do.
Vote. Just vote. You have to, and vote on your local levels. Not everyone's talking about the presidential election. Let's talk about what's really important. The people who are signing things. You know, our county board members, your city council members, your school board members. I mean, these are all really important things that you need to be voting for all the time. If you aren't registered to vote, it's very easy to do. Go on myvote.com. You can get on there and you can request a ballot. But I don't think the importance of the local level elections are really talked about. And those are the people that can help you get funding for people who are coming home from prison and help you set things up. So get involved with your county board members, city council, and just vote, please. I know so many people say, oh, I don't want to vote. My vote doesn't count. It does. It really does count.
Thank you for that, Leah. Niki?
I want to stress the importance of mentorship because I have been mentored by multiple individuals after my release. I'm actually living with a woman that had volunteered at the prison with the church, and I believe strongly in mentorship. So if you are in a position to where you can come alongside someone that has just been incarcerated, I would really like you to encourage you to do that. Because it is really the difference. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to change the way a person thinks. And sometimes people don't even know how they think until they see an alternative. They don't know that a different life is possible until they see it being lived. But people need to actually give of their time to do that. And I know it's asking a lot because we're all busy and we all have lives, but I promise you the dividends that you're going to reap from that, knowing that you're sowing into a person's life. You are a living legacy for a person when you mentor them. You are helping them to then pass that on to the next person, and it's a ripple effect. And that is how we change the world. And we vote. If you have the right to vote, you need to exercise the right to vote. And we are also pushing Unlock the Vote. There was a bill that was written up. I'm doing research on it right now. We're really trying to get this to be voted in because I believe if you're paying taxes, you deserve the right to vote. And I have multiple jobs. I have 3 jobs, and I would love the right to vote. I just got my citizenship after I got out, and you don't realize how much of a privilege it is. Sometimes you don't realize what you have until you lose it. And most people commit crimes when they're younger and they're not really thinking about voting. And then as you become an adult or you have children or you own a business, whatever, then it becomes relevant. So we can't keep punishing people for the mistakes of their past and destroying their potential in the process. So please vote. Please, if you're in the Racine area and you want to volunteer with the ACLU or you would like next steps, please feel free to reach out to me and I will come out there. I will help you. I will come alongside you however I can, because at the end of the day, one life reaches another, and that's how we change the world.
Thank you so much, Niki. And we can certainly put your email along with Leah's email in the chat and in Zoom. Anything with voting or questions, please feel free to reach out to these two. Philip, what's your call to action for everybody?
I would say to kind of piggyback off what they said, you do want to vote more on a local level, like me and you were talking about yesterday, because the people on the local level can make the most change, you know. And on what Niki said, I think it's important to be a mentor, especially if you're in a position to help somebody. You should always want to mentor, because one thing I'm realizing, a lot of people just don't know. They don't know what resources they have available to them. They don't know their full potential because they've never been taught. You know, you sometimes if you've been able to make it out, you should always reach back and pull somebody who wants to be where you're at or farther. And then I think what's most important too, you gotta respect people's opinion, no matter what their opinion is. You should always respect someone else's opinion. You know, they have the right to think the way they want to think. Because I actually, when all the protesting was going down, I actually sat on the Trump protesters' side, not because I agree with them, but what I wanted to do was kind of understand their thinking. You know, why were they feeling the way they felt about Black Lives Matter? And maybe I could tell them something that they didn't know to give them a better understanding about why we felt the way we felt about certain things. So most important to me, respect others' opinion and be a listener sometimes, and always be able to have a conversation with people, not always, you know, arguing or, you know, strong debating to where you want to push your opinion on them.
Thank you for that. And it kind of brings us back to the conversation you and I had yesterday, Philip, about, you know, with the Black Lives Matter organization and really the protests that we're seeing are really about police brutality and what happened with Jacob Blake and systemic racism. And really it's a nonpartisan issue. It's something that everybody, you know, this needs to be addressed. So thank you all. I know it's about 7:31. I'm going to go ahead and give my calls to action. If anybody wants the voting toolkit or anything like that, Molly can go ahead and attach that in our Facebook feed and in our chat. If anybody has any, like I said, any questions or anything, please feel free to reach out to Leah or Niki. So I first want to go ahead. My first call to action to all of you is the ACLU is demanding the resignation of Kenosha police officials. This just came out today. Kenosha Sheriff David Beth and Police Chief Daniel McGinnis allowed police to fraternize with white supremacist counter-protesters that night and let the shooter leave, even as other protesters desperately yelled that he was responsible for the shootings. It's clear Sheriff Beth and Chief McGinnis must be held responsible for the murder or for the attempted murder of Jacob Blake and the murders of these protesters. Call Kenosha Police and Fire Commission to demand the resignation of Kenosha Police Chief McGinnis. Molly will go ahead and attach that. I urge all of you to please call. We have a number here. We also have a sample script that you can use as well as calling our Governor Tony Evers to demand the removal of Kenosha County Sheriff David Beth. We have two different phone numbers as well as scripts. Please call and share this and ask other people to call as well. The last call to action I want to leave with all of you is please contact your legislators and ask them where they stand with crimeless revocation if they're aware, and share with them what you heard today, and let them know that this is something that we want to see them vote to or develop legislation to end the process of crimeless revocation in the state of Wisconsin, given that this is the driver to mass incarceration. And primarily, I mean, we're locking people up due to poverty, but you know, when we talk about revocation, we're revocating people simply for relapse, substance use. And so please call your legislators. If you're not sure of who they are, we can go ahead and put the link in both chats to let you know how to find out who your legislators are. If you have questions on what to say, please feel free to reach out to one of us. People are welcome to go ahead and email me or my colleague, Sean Wilson, and we're happy to you know, walk you through or share some things that you can form and say. But I want to give a thank you so much, Molly Collins, for being behind the scenes. I want to thank my team in general. This has been a heavy week for everybody. Thanks to our comms team for really pushing through. I know this is a heavy time for all of us, but one thing I want to tell everybody is we keep fighting. You know, we keep fighting till not only systemic racism ends in all of our systems, but you know, through all this, and it might stay heavy, but no matter what, we don't give up. And I want to be able to thank Philip, thank you for joining us. Niki, thank you for joining us as well. And Leah, thank you all for sharing everything that you did today. So we appreciate you.